Welcome back, baseball fans. The 1961 WAR5 project. Today we're going to look at expansion teams, see what they end up with. Usually they're going to end up with two good players, and then it's going to start to drop off from there. First, we're going to take a look at the Houston Astros, a year away from their own expansion in 1962. And they ended up with the two Pittsburgh pitchers, Bob Friend and Harvey Haddocks, and then after that, it really drops off. These expansion teams only have $92 to play with, $10 less than the traditional teams. The Astros had $18 left over. So Bob Friend's a starter 6 with a 3.85 ERA on 3 days rest, but a losing record. And Harvey Haddocks, the starter 7, 4.10 ERA, 156 innings. So not a big loss for the Pirates to lose these guys, and who are having just an average kind of year. Next team would be the Mets. Oddly enough, I probably made this Met team better than the actual 62 expansion team because they're going to get some decent players, you know, that they probably wouldn't have normally had an opportunity to get. Frank Thomas, Bob Perky, Terry Fox, Eddie Casco. Gil Hodges was negative WAR here, and Roger Craig is on that 62 Mets team as well. Richie Ashburn's here also. All negative WAR players in 61. Here's a slugging outfield DH type of player with 27 home runs. He's the best Met. And the Mets, if he's on the 62 Mets, maybe they don't lose 120 games because this guy can really hit. Bob Perky's a starter 8. 16 and 12, most likely wouldn't have done that for the Mets. Terry Fox is a nice reliever with a sparkling 142 earned run average. Doesn't quite look like a 142 earned run average. You got Eddie Casco at shortstop. And let me just scroll down to Gil Hodges for a second. Negative WAR, folks, for Gil Hodges, a 1E4 first baseman with a decent amount of power and average and OPS. It's not glamorous. Oh, it's 242. 8 homers and 200 at-bats. So limited playing time drives the WAR down, and I guess the average isn't there. Looks like he's got enough home runs, but that's about 18 in a full season. Of course, Roger Craig. He only loses 6 games here with a 6.13 ERA. That's a look at the 61 Mets as we have created them from scratch. All right. Now we're going to get into the expansion teams. And I really like what these expansion teams got. Mostly because we had to go back to the American League, where we know the Tigers and the Yankees still have value that's going to be available. And Kansas City, oh boy, opportunistic. They're the first crack at these guys. They ended up with Don Mossy, Jim Bunning, Yogi Berra, Johnny Blanchard. All reasonably, look at that, all reasonably placed teams. This start, I mean, they're already better than the Washington Senators, Kansas City A's, probably better than the Red Sox, probably better than the Twins and the Angels. Just by having access to the Yankee players and Tiger players. Don Mossy was a Tiger. 296 ERA. Jim Bunning also, starter 8. Right? Hal Brown with Baltimore, I believe, right? John Blanchard. So here's a nice bat out of the Yankees. Yankees would like to have all these guys. They can't. 21 homers and a 305 average. Don Lee, a capable starter. And then buried in the back page here, Because of Elston Howard being a -2 arm catcher, is Yogi Berra, still very productive player, of course. 400 and some plate appearances, but he's got 22 bombs and a 271 average. No triples, 11 doubles. So, yeah, only 28 strikeouts. So, he's a 3-4 in left field. He can't throw at all. Good hit and run guy. Yeah, he's not who he used to be, but he's still a heck of a player. And the Yankees couldn't afford him. So, good news for the and frankly, Kansas City was simply the beneficiary of being the first expansion team in the American League to select. They wouldn't in the previous draft, because in the previous draft, Kansas City and Minnesota were expansion. They didn't have actual MLB teams. So the Brewers are also going to look pretty good, or the Seattle Pilots. Let's take a look at their values here. Clete Boyer, Steve Barber, Tony Kubek, Luis Arroyo, Turk Lone, Dave Hillman. So this is where Tony Kubek ended up. You got a 1 third baseman from the Yankees. Steve Barber, a nice starter, 8 from Baltimore, I believe. Yeah. 18-game winner on 3 days rest. And here's Tony Kubek. Shortstop, doesn't have a lot of power, of course. And the Yankees, they had other, the Yankees can't keep all their guys, and Kubek and Berra are gone. And here they end up. Luis Arroyo, another Yankee. 15-5 with a 2.19 ERA and 119 innings. So Kansas City and Milwaukee have really scooped up all that leftover talent. Good news for them, because the next 2 teams are going to be National League teams again. It'll be the Expos and the Padres. So these expansion teams are taking teams from their same league. So we'll look at the Expos. Johnny Padres would have been a Dodger, George Altman, a Cub, Ron Fairley, Sturdivant, McLean, Cunningham. Johnny Padres, he would have been right there with Koufax and Drysdale on the Dodgers. 183 innings, 18-game winner. George Altman was playing right field for the Cubs. They had other needs, and they let this guy go. He was actually more productive than Billy Williams, but they kept Billy Williams for name recognition more than Altman, who doesn't have as long of a productive career as Billy Williams would. Ron Fairley, a one-way player, but it's a good way. It's a good one-way in a platoon. 322. Starter 7, Tom Sturdivant. The 2.83 ERA in 86 innings. Another starter 7. Nice players here for the Expos. I guess the way to look at it is these expansion teams like the 62 Mets or the Expos, whatever, we knew they struggled, but we're giving them talent, but not enough of it. I mean, you still have the idea that how do you get a 20 or 25 man roster? And it's like, yeah, you'd have trouble completing this process. It's a good start, don't get me wrong, but you'd have trouble completing the process. The Padres, Stan Williams was a starter, Frank Bowling. What were the Giants going to do with the Alou brothers that they couldn't afford to keep them? They both went to San Diego, Philippe and Matty Alou. Stan Williams turned to a fantastic reliever. Here he's still a great starter for the Dodgers, 15-game winner. Nice second baseman, Frank Bowling. A lot of power against lefties. 15 homers, 262. Philippe Alou, a 2-2 in the outfield. Plenty of power versus lefties with 18 homers. Dick Hall from Baltimore. Here is a starter. Eventually becomes a closer. Ed Bailey, the catcher. My goodness. 13 homers, 245. He's better than 56, I believe. Carlton Willie. And here's Mattiello. Pretty much the same card year in and year out. Lots of singles, not many walks. Leadoff hitter who doesn't walk a lot but hits 300. 15 walks and 200 at bats. C Stealer. That is the Padres. Next up, we're going to go to the last level of expansion team. The 8 teams from the 1970s and beyond. So they're going to only have 80-some bucks to spend. But Seattle and Toronto spent to the cap. They spent a lot of money. So Seattle spent all but $6 of their $84 allotment. Let's take a look at their... So, they have Bill Stafford from that Yankee pitching staff, Willie Kirkland, Al Smith, Dick Brown, and they're sort of steady throughout in their spending. Nothing glamorous. It's not like 2 great guys and a bunch of scrubs. It's probably 6 decent guys without anybody being amazing. So Stafford, 14-game winner, 268 ERA for the Yankees. You see the rate on Yankee talent, which is, I guess, what you want to see. So it's not so obvious that the Yankees are just going to destroy the American League and win the World Series. There'll be something to play for with a lot of their talent mixed up throughout all of baseball. Willie Kirkland, a Cleveland Indian. Al Smith, a nice power-hitting third baseman with 28 bombs from the White Sox. You're seeing, you know, you take a Yankee, you take an Indian, you take a White Sox, they're all pretty productive. You take a -2 arm catcher from the Tigers. Those are all good baseball teams who lost vital pieces here. We'll probably see the same from the Blue Jays. Toronto up next. Milt Pappas from Baltimore, Floyd Robinson, Bill Bruton, and then they move into the steady players, in the next shell of the steady players. So Milt Pappas would have been at the top end of that Baltimore pitching staff, 303, a 13-game winner. Floyd Robinson, a .310 hitting outfielder with 11 home runs, did it with the White Sox. Billy Bruton, a great defensive center fielder with the bats not there. Still hitting .257 with 17 home runs. Most of it comes on the right side. That's going to be a hard to get 17 home runs, I'm telling you. Jim O'Donohue, a relief starter. And Billy Pierce, a lefty. Art Fowler, a longtime pitching coach. Here he was on the Angels expansion team. All right, next up, it's going to be the Florida Marlins. Pedro Ramos was on that Twins staff, and he's $18. Chuck Estrada off of Baltimore, $12. Then it starts to get really thin. By this part of the draft, you don't see much WAR value at all. Look at the minus values, limited plus value. You know, from here down, the net is almost a net zero. That's -6.5, 7, -9. So from there down, it's net zero. So they have 5 guys with positive WAR net. Pedro Ramos, part of that Twins pitching staff with Camilo Pascual and Jim Cott. 395 ERA in 264 innings. It's a losing record, which is why the Twins didn't keep him. Chuck Estrada on a good Baltimore team. 15-game winner. Juan Marichal. Giants couldn't keep everybody, and Marichal had to go. He's only $9. $9 pitcher, a 3.90 ERA in 185 innings. Jose Pagan's playing shortstop. And that's about all the name players here with Florida. All right, next up, Ohio players of the American League. And I got to find out where they're. There we. No, it's Cleveland's. Detroit. Can't find theirs, but they have Willie Davis, they got off the Dodgers. Jim Gilliam, they got off the Dodgers. Frank Funk, Ray Moore, Chuck Hinton. They also got Charlie Neal, I believe, off the Dodgers. Charlie Neal. I don't know where their monetary chart disappeared to. Now we'll get into the Mountain Time Zone teams, and what I like looking at on these teams is that they're all built in a different strategy. Arizona builds their team on batting average. Glenn Hobby is a pitcher, then everybody else is under $10. So let's see what averages pop out of this list. Here's your starting pitcher. Not a particularly great one. So Jerry Lynch has plenty of power and a good batting average. It's .315, but it's only 200 plate appearances. That's how you get value to this team. Barney Schultz, a nice reliever who gets righties out. Another pitcher, Billy O'Dell, he was with the Giants. They couldn't afford him. They couldn't afford Marichal. They couldn't afford Jack Sanford. Ron Klein. Okay, now Carl Warwick. Not much average there. .239. Darrell Johnson will give you some average. .270. Dick Gernert. Hits .302, but look at the plate appearances. 70 plate appearances. That's why this team goes out and gets them. Red Shandings. Look what his average is. He's 300 and 120 at-bats, but the defense is shot, and he's just a one-way player. Harry Bright, 300 against lefties, 240 overall. Wes Covington, 300 versus righties, 290 overall. Jim Brewer, very young. Never thought I'd see this. I've never seen the homers on 9 and 10, and on 9 and 10. Oh, and there's a 13 shot on 9. Yeah, Jim served up the long ball. 17 of them in 87 innings. All right, Colorado, speaking of the long ball, they should have plenty here. Plenty enough for them. They actually have 3 guys in double digits, more than Arizona, and then steady in this area. So they went out and spent for the homers. Gordy Coleman, plenty of power. Gordy has 26 bombs in 600 plate appearances, hitting .287. Did that with the Reds. Well, you can expect that. The Reds always known for offense. Wally Post, another Red player with 20 home runs. This is where the extra Reds that they can't afford end up. Gordy Coleman, Wally Post. Gene Freeze, also a Red, with 26 home runs. They all ended up with the Colorado Rockies. How about that? So, you want Robinson and Pinson, or do you want these 3 guys? Carl Sawatsky was a Cardinal, I believe. Yeah. 10 home runs and under 200 at-bats. We mentioned Jack Sanford. This is where he ended up. 13-game winner. Jack Balchin was a Philly, I believe. .387. That's a nice look. Chuck Essingen has hit a lot of homers also. Did this for Cleveland, I believe. He did with Cleveland, .289. That is Colorado. Next up, and this is going to be a nice look. Vegas. Finally get to look at the cards to make sense of how they draft. So they spent the littlest amount of WAR money. Look at the prices of these guys. They have 14.5, 13.5. Then it drops down into some serious negative WAR here. But look what they ended up with positional value. They got a 1E20 shortstop, a 1-2 catcher. They got a 1-17 second baseman. This is the team that builds on defense. 1 -2 in center. A pitcher. A 2-25 first baseman. That's the best they could find. Another pitcher. Bobby Del Greco, a 1-2 center fielder, another pitcher. And Andy Carey, the only other two, a 2-23 third baseman. So they have 2s at first and third. Everywhere else is a 1. Gus Bell's also a 1. So they set out and finally achieved their mission of Vegas, normally in a 4-year carryover league, tries to find 1s everywhere. In 1 of 4 seasons, they did it here. They couldn't have done it in the last 2. They maybe had 1 or 2 1s on the team altogether. They have 6 here. 6 1s and a couple of 2s. Now Portland actually spent the most money. They actually go BPA. So they went with the big ticket items regardless of how good the cards looked and ran out of money at the bottom again. They had to take on 11.5 WAR because they spent so much at the top. This almost looks like a traditional MLB team. But you have Ray Sadecki, a starter 8. Surprisingly long career. He actually pitches on the Portland team in the mid-70s. So here, I mean, he's got like a 15, 16-year career, 223 innings. Larry Jackson, another starter 8. So capably, they could start a pitching staff off. Joe Torre, catcher only here with the Milwaukee Braves. Lee May, also off that Milwaukee Brave team. 271. Wes Stock off of Baltimore, and then it drops off after that. Don Zimmer was the Cubs second baseman. He was steady. And Don Larson was a White Sox. Not that much, though. And that is a look at the last expansion team, Portland. So we've looked at all the teams of 1961. We have one more WAR5 project to go. It's the year of 1968. We'll be doing that in the next few weeks. Thanks for checking out this project. We'll see you next time.